Sydney's getting warmer. So at the moment it's getting 1 to 1.5 degrees warmer in the overall mean temperature. Nationally, it is very similar since 1901. So what does that actually mean to what we're going to talk about? It is about evaporation, it is about the use of water, and we're lucky enough in production horticulture that we can use water more than once. So we can apply it, recycle it, reuse it. So we will talk about that in a second and part of our panel. Our rainfall patterns, and I can say that this is probably a global issue, our rainfall patterns have changed. We find now that our rain falls in short, sharp bursts, and we end up with a significant amount of water that is falling at once. So how do we actually manage that? And it comes back to what Chris was saying before. How do we actually capture and reuse that water? And whether that is on business or it is at a government level where they're actually capturing and reusing that water. Now that water, again, it doesn't have to be that potable to do for our data centres. They could use quite raw water to actually do what they're going to do. Anyway, that's for another discussion. The other things we have to deal with, and which some of them comes through, is just the weather. Victoria has had what they call not an interesting summer. So parts of our country has very diverse climate. So the north of Australia at the moment is underwater. We are somewhat in the middle, and our poor states to the south have been very hot, dry, and have had significant fire levels. The other thing that we probably need to look at in managing those environmental issues is what do we do about investing into water efficient infrastructure. I think holistically, if you look back at how the nursery industry was used back in the, probably 10, 20 years ago, is that we had water. Water went into a dam that was normally on the property, and we used it once, what spilled over, but it is now about how we keep that water in a very clean and clear state, and then we can reuse it. So we need to start looking at investing and having schemes with our partners to actually invest in recycling that water so that it is of a potable stage. It's adopting precision irrigation, and we've been talking about that and using a lot more technology. There is a significant amount of technology that we must adapt and use in being precise about what we use, because it is what we're talking about. It's about shifting climate resilient production systems. We were the lucky country in Australia where we have wonderful climate and we can grow things outside. That's starting to change. We are now having some significant weather pressures put upon us, as it is everywhere else in the globe. And the diversification of species, we have to then look constantly that we have to move to plants that will survive some of these diversifications in the climate. The practical and scalability parts of innovation strategies for water resilient nurseries. So it is talking about now thinking about it, but it is actually shifting. So it is actually doing what we should be doing. It's redesigning production businesses, so they are going to become hotter and drier. So the way we used to water and irrigate may not be fit for purpose anymore. And adapting data-driven planning and forecasting so that we can use water in a more efficient way. Again, we'll go back to using AI. We're going to use more water out from, but we don't not pull against it, but we need to use and look at technology that comes forward. And who holds the responsibility for driving the meaningful adaptation of water pressure? And that's a very broad, because it's incumbent on growers to start to adopt and adapt to new technologies. Industry bodies to actually drive that as an agenda, which then should be pushing that through to government at all levels to make sure that there is change within where we need to go. We need to research and use our innovation partners We are very lucky in Australia to have innovation partners like Horticulture Australia that we pay a pot levy to, but we can use that monies then to do for innovation. And lastly will be the broader supply chain. I think there are times when water efficiencies will come back down through the supply chain, back up and down. It was talked about a little bit before, but it was also about how we adapt to the landscape, because it's all right as a production business, we produce the product, but it is about putting it back into the environment. And I think it might have been Bill talking about potable water that's used within the landscape. There is no reason why we can't keep our environment the drier they're getting. We need to work a way of sustaining the drier periods between our intense rainfalls to actually keep the environment green, because without a green environment we have a hotter and drier climate that we will not survive if we don't start to think about that now.
Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here today on this panel, bringing a technology perspective to this important topic about water pressure, which in horticulture and from a technology point of view is deeply connected to irrigation decisions. And for a long time, irrigation decisions were made based on grower experience, and in many cases they still are. In the past, growers used to rely on weather conditions. They used to look at the plants. They used to follow seasonal routines in order to make a decision. That experience is still very important. But now we have something we didn't have before. We have data. And in the last 10 to 15 years, technology has allowed us to measure things we could not measure before. So microclimate and weather conditions on site, soil and substrate moisture, how much water is actually applied, and how much drains out of the pot, and so on. So this has enabled a big shift, moving from fixed irrigation schedules to more responsive irrigation. And instead of watering because it's hot or because it's summer, growers can water because the plant has actually used the water. And this alone can make a big difference. So better irrigation scheduling can significantly reduce water use just by avoiding over-watering. And in many cases, it improves plant quality and uniformity as well, which means that technology helps improve the whole system, not just water use. So I saw an example the other day of a grower in the United States that was able to save around 360 million gallons of water in a year just using one of those new technologies to improve irrigation decisions. So it's an impressive result, and it proves that technology really works. So I think we are now in a moment that I would call the connected phase, which is essentially a phase where technologies are getting connected. And this is very important because when technologies are connected, they tend to improve productivity impact. And productivity has everything to do with this topic, because productivity is nothing but the amount of produced output by a given amount of input. And water is a very important input. So if we are able to optimize inputs, we are able to improve our productivity as well. So in this sense, sensors are connected to smart controllers. Controllers can adjust irrigation automatically, and growers can see what is happening on their phones in real time, 24 hours, 7 days a week. And that's where IoT plays a big role, and I'm sure most of you know the concept of IoT, Internet of Things, which is essentially a network of devices connected to the internet to collect and share data. So soil moisture sensors, plant sensors, and other weighting sensors are all examples of IoT devices. And now we are transitioning to a new phase, which is a phase of decision support and AI. And why is this important? This is important because we are now dealing with a huge amount of data. Data has been increasing exponentially over the last few years. And AI is an important resource to help us understand this data, process this data, and extract meaningful information for decision making. And essentially to answer two basic questions. When should I irrigate and how much should I apply today? So these technologies are not here to replace grower experience. I think they are here to support it. And they are here to reduce uncertainty and also to help with complex operations with multiple crops and multiple growing environments. So just to conclude, I think water pressure is a challenge that is not going away. Climate variability is not going away either. But technology can help us respond to those challenges without sacrificing productivity. And just to wrap up this introduction, I think water pressure is a big challenge, but it's also an opportunity for us to understand how to manage water more efficiently, how to reduce waste, and how to build more resilient and productive plants and horticulture systems. Thank you.
I thought I might kick off with thanks both of you for your opening remarks. Really interesting and really great to set some context. And we will have some audience questions in a little bit, but I thought we might just have a bit of discussion around, obviously this is a session on climate change and water and the impacts to the industry, but I'd like to hear from both of you what you see as the biggest risks in the future for production nurseries. I suppose, obviously climate change is one, but that could also be seen as an opportunity. So what other risks do you see? Maybe start with Andy.
I think probably the biggest thing is managing how our end product that we produce ends up into the environment. Because again, if we can't sustain and the environment has changed, we are caught in a vexing problem that we're trying to cool the planet by using something that we grow, and if we can't keep that and sustain it during these drier periods, the landscape will look a little different to where it is now. So I think we just need to work this forward with this precious resource. We can do it we can put people on the moon, we can water the plants and keep the environment cool.
Yeah, I'll bring a different perspective. I think from a technology perspective, the risk would be the lack of capability, because it's clear that technology is important and can help with that. But the lack of capability sometimes can create some barriers for adoption of new solutions, which is essential to deal with this problem today. So in the case of what we've been doing at Hort Innovation, we've been trying to reduce this barrier by creating more demonstrations and more opportunities for growers to understand how to work with those new technologies and adopt them as well.
So in terms of adopting, what technologies and innovative strategies and things like that do you think growers can adopt to be more sustainable in the future?
I think there is a lot out there. Industries have been sometimes in the horticultural sector have been slower to adopt with new technologies, but I think once they gravitate to it, I think it will be a game changer for everybody to know how much water is there, how much they're applying, because without data, you can't run your businesses. It is no different. I'll use the analogy of going back to the day where you used to use an old ledger and a pencil to work out your accounts. We now have moved forward. The same thing will happen with technology within business.
And you mentioned AI before. Is AI a potential solution for opportunities for the future? How do you see that working, Eduardo?
Yeah, definitely. Well, AI is a great tool, not only in this case, but across the board. But there is a lot of hype around AI, especially in agriculture. But when it comes to irrigation, I think AI is a great resource when we have complex operation where simple rules cannot solve it. When we have multiple data sources, for example, we have weather, we have sensors, we have remote sensing, we have a whole bunch of variables to consider. So in those cases, AI can be a great tool to help us and pull all this information together in order to extract meaningful information to improve the decision making. Yeah.
Right. So we've talked about some of these, I guess, the changing environment and the competition for what water might be accessible and different types of water. We've sort of talked about that this morning. I'd kind of like to get both of your thoughts on how, and maybe, I don't know, maybe I can chip in here too, but how serious are water concerns for growers right now? Like, do you hear, is there a threat that some growers might not be able to operate in certain areas due to lack of water supply or anything like that? Are you hearing?
No, I think what it is about, again, the smart organisations have seen and businesses have seen that water is a staple, and it is, if you don't have water security, you don't have a business. So the businesses who have thought about that going forward will survive and they will go on. Water is one of those things, and it was just interesting, and on a bit of a side note on the issues in the Middle East at the moment, I believe a desal plant has been taken out, and there's great issues of now water security for a country. Water was always been one of those discussed in the days that wars will be fought over water. And it doesn't matter where you are in the world, countries share a lot of water, and one country, we have the same issue with states, where there are some states to the north of us that take way too much water out of certain rivers, and as it moves its way south, there's always a complaint and very parochial about who owns what water. It will go forward, so I think businesses now, and especially if you're in Queensland or New South Wales, water is not an issue. And I think that is sometimes the narrow thought that a lot of businesses have, that they worry about what is happening this season, but not worrying about how you future-proof your business, because that is the critical thing, is that, as we were saying, we have a drought roughly every 15 to 20 years of some significance. We've probably got a little bit of time up our sleeve, but we may not, because the variability of our climate, you can never work out, is that I think they were going to talk that Victoria was going to have a cooler, dry, wetter summer. Well, you had extremely the opposite. So again, I think businesses just need to understand that what do they actually need? They need land, but they also need water. And without water, you cannot grow a product.
You're absolutely right. Water's not an issue until it is an issue. The example I gave before about the burst pipe in the street, everyone's on the phone complaining to the water utility, come and fix this, it's a disaster, it's shocking. But no one even thought about water that day until they saw the burst pipe. And the same with the desal plant in the Middle East, suddenly it's affecting their water supply and everyone's up in arms, and it's like, it's seriously worrying. But everyone just expects water to come out of the taps, whether they're at home or at work or business, right? So, yeah, it's interesting. It comes back to that awareness thing. Yeah, absolutely. So, any comments, Eduardo? Nothing to add? Yeah. Any questions from the audience? Should we open it up to broader discussion? Happy to take some questions. Over there.
I'm interested in your the panel to comment on public perception. As soon as water starts to get tight and there's the talk of water restrictions and being more water efficient, we're not really talking about the importance of plants in around our cities and the importance of continuing to encourage our public to water them and to look after them, because they are the lungs of our cities. So I just want to make sure that the messaging that we're doing here translates all the way through, and it just doesn't stop at the consumer who's terrified about putting water onto anything.
I can answer that. Well, I hear you. I think we don't put a lot of emphasis on our amenity horticulture and out into the park. Why does the gardener, the local park, have the first hit of any water restrictions? It's because it's visible. Most of the water use, and of course it's very anecdotal, where does the water get used? Well, the only place they see water being used and they deem as a waste is being put onto garden or green space. I suppose we've got to change the narrative around to look at that. Is green space, again, how do we actually portray green space as something that is viable, and do we need to use fully potable water when a lot of second grade water gets removed and put back into the environment, out into the ocean or the river, where we could actually be using it to save, large mature trees that take hundreds of years to grow and can be put under a lot of stress during a very dry period.
It's very hard to place water restrictions in areas that aren't visible as well. So you can't really restrict indoor water use and tell people to have, the messaging is around 4-minute showers and around using a full load in your washing machine and things like that. But how do you police that? How do you actually enforce somebody to have a 4-minute shower? In the outdoor space, if you're using a hose to hose down your hard surface, then you can see them on the street and you can find them. Back in the Millennium Drought when we had restrictions, people did receive fines. Sadly, that knocks on to the car wash industry. The car wash industry back during the Millennium Drought was under serious water restrictions as well. Again, I imagine just because it was really visible to customers. I think there's probably more, when it comes to water restrictions, there's more work that we can do there to have a system that's fairer for everyone in all sectors of all sectors. But I think too that if we're using it efficiently all the time, then we probably don't need to go to restrictions because we're all just efficient already. That's an interesting thing to think about. In an ideal world, something to work towards. Any more questions? Yeah.
Okay. Back to the growers. Is there any company, any nursery, who is looking to this water pressure as an opportunity? For example, investing in a change of their assortment with plants more water resistant or plants that needs less water than normal. So take this lack of water as an opportunity instead of just a problem.
Yeah, there are businesses within Australia that do that, that work within that. But again, we are caught, and especially in the retail side of things, with fashion. So, it is driven by the Northern Hemisphere that all of the new product that comes down in, some things are very water efficient. There are businesses that spend a lot of time and researching and making sure that that's what they can grow. They change the palette around. And it is, to be honest, it's an opportunity for people. But businesses are somewhat lazy in that side of things, where they will grow where the money is, because that's where it sits.
Well, I would like to ask the same question to the panel that I asked to you. Can you, for example, with the use of data, can you translate the application of data-driven technology into actually cost savings in dollars for growers? So how can you make certain that their investment in these new technologies will actually have a return on their investment? How can you present that to them?
Yeah, that's a good question. Data-driven decisions can help growers to optimize the use of inputs, as I said in the beginning. And in some cases, for example, protected cropping, energy is one of the major cost drivers for protected cropping growers. And energy is also involved in the process of irrigation. So when you optimize irrigation, you're also automatically optimizing energy. So this reverts back into savings for growers. This is just an example. There are many other examples where how improving optimization of irrigation can also save dollars for growers.
You mentioned about when to irrigate and how much to irrigate. That's two key decisions in the process. A way of data contributing to that decision making is through soil moisture probes in batches of plants. Where's the technology at that potentially a nursery that has 1,000 batches of different plants has 1,000 soil probes? Where's the world at in terms of that technology, and is it cost effective?
Yeah, well, sensors are one of the possibilities. The other possibility that I can see now is the use of thermal imaging, which you can see across the field what is happening and identify stress zones so that I can also use this information to improve your decisions using AI, for example. There are plant sensors as well that you can attach to the plant to understand certain aspects that to contribute to the decision as well. So yeah, I think the number of solutions, the number of sensors, the number of variables to help this decision is increasing a lot, yeah.
I actually saw some that sort of technology in Holland last year, and the greenhouse protective cropping side of things have got it all nailed. They have automated drones that fly constantly all day, backwards and forwards. They will photograph, they will look at the crop continually. Problem we've got as we move outside, and this is across the globe, is you can have an unregulated drone system within a protected environment. It's just outside that we still haven't got to, but it will be here before we know it, where I think, as you're saying, you can let a drone go out and do a lot of that manual scouting that you would normally done by a person, which will probably be more accurate in the fact that, again, it takes the data that has been real time and bringing it back without having a human intervention. So it is like a lot of technology. I think we're on the cusp of it, which is pretty exciting.
Yeah, and just to add to that, we've been working on a project for avocados, which essentially the objective is to identify different practices and different technologies to improve the irrigation process. So we are testing many different technologies to understand what really fits with that specific industry. And this is one of those projects that I can see extending to other industries in the future, for example, nurseries. Also, because each industry has a different need, right? So we need to understand how each technology fits with specific needs from each industry.
Isn't the real question the plants, the trees in particular, that the AIPH members are producing globally is a very high standard. We see it globally in cities around the world. The street trees that are going in are truly spectacular. But in Australia, having worked in local government for 10 years, we planted some 30,000 trees in that 10 years, and I always allocated at least 15 to 20% for post-planting maintenance. Today, certainly in New South Wales, I don't know of one local government authority that has allocated any funds at all to applying this precious water that we're talking about to care for the plants that the members of AIPH are producing. And in New South Wales, we are producing, as in Victoria and other states, a brilliant street tree, but it goes into a street and then completely forgotten. And it's, in other words, our product that we're producing is not being cared for. And I think maybe we do need to extend some pressure to those who are purchasing our high-quality street trees to maintain them.
Really good point. I see that all the time when I'm walking down the street. You see a beautiful new tree that's been planted that's desperate need of water, it's not being looked after. Council's responsibility to water it, presumably. I'm not sure what to respond apart from just to reflect on your frustration.
Well, and sometimes it is about the social licence. It is sometimes about community adopting these trees that go into streets. Again, are we valuing the green infrastructure? Green infrastructure is probably the thing that is left last in any landscape. There is always the hard bricks and mortar that go up, and then what's left at the end is green, and that is always something that is either cut back, which is the sad part of all of that.
Yeah, it's Matt Dolan. I'm from New Zealand Plant Producers in New Zealand. One of the things that we have really objected to during droughts in New Zealand is the promotion and the communication with the public is usually about their garden. You know, switch off your tap, don't irrigate, etc. And what we have said to councils is you need to lay off that. People's gardens are way more important than washing their car. It's way more important than that spa pool. And we have discouraged them from using gardening as their go-to for promoting it. They say that it's really good to use gardening to engage the public, something they can relate to. We're saying it's impacting food security, it's impacting the investment that people are making in street trees, etc. And without that story about the importance of green life, we risk being the easy target for water restrictions.
Every jurisdiction has different levels of water restrictions, different things you can and can't do during level 1, 2 and 3, right? And eventually it's always the garden that suffers. One thing we do say though at the Water Conservancy is that really, really strongly believe this too, that it's possible to have a beautiful green garden using only a very small amount of water, even under water restriction times and during drought. You can still have a beautiful green garden. It's just about watering it in the correct way, right? And plants don't always need a lot of water. As long as it's just watered in the right place at the right time. And even during water restrictions, you can still do that. It's just about doing it in the right way. So, yeah.
Thank you. Just to follow on from that, I wonder how much you see it in your role in Water Conservancy as supporting people to do more gardening. I think back to maybe 15 years ago, in the UK, we'd had 2 winters probably of not enough rain. We'd be used to maybe hosepipe ban coming in the summer, late summer, didn't affect the industry too much. But then at that time, we had our largest water company, Thames Water, decided that they would introduce a hosepipe ban from March, which was pretty catastrophic for the industry that was coming. And their key message was, don't water your gardens, don't buy plants, don't do anything like that. But it stimulated a really good dialogue between the industry and an organisation called Waterwise, which maybe is doing a similar job probably to your organisation. And Waterwise was very concerned about this message. They felt that to disconnect the public from their gardens, from responsibly doing that was a negative thing for water management generally. And so they were quite keen to bring in sort of exemptions for drip irrigation and other sort of best practice guides to support, to encourage people to still keep gardening under these circumstances. And it resulted in a better connection with the water industry from that time on, where they saw it as an easy hit to just say, stop gardening. So I'm wondering how proactive your organisation is in not only saying you can still garden, but to proactively say that gardening is a good thing in terms of water management within cities.
Yeah, thanks, Tim. Yeah, I know Waterwise very well. They're a key partner of ours in the UK to deliver Smart Drop, and they deliver Water Night with us in the UK too. So I'm very aware of the great work that they're doing at Waterwise. We absolutely help households, or our messaging is all around helping households how to manage and deliver and keep a beautiful green garden in the most efficient way possible. And we do that through behavioural recommendations and tips and advice. You know, casting your shower water, your bath water onto your garden is sensible for some people, but not everyone if you're elderly, and it could present risks and be too heavy for you to carry. But there are a range of different behavioural tips that we advise people on to keep their garden green, as well as products too through the Smart Drop program. And you know, I would argue that a hosepipe ban is not the best. A hose pipe, or a hose as we call it here, is not an efficient way of watering your garden anyway. So I think it should probably be banned all year round, to be honest, whether you're in restrictions or not. And there are much better ways to be watering your garden than using a hose, or a sprinkler that's attached to your hose, even worse. So I don't really have an issue with a hosepipe ban as such, as long as other things like drip irrigation and rain sensors and Wi-Fi irrigation controllers and things like that, they all have their place during all times to keep gardens greening. Yeah.